throughout this course. Next week, we're basically going to be talking about how the format is in the Old Testament, the 5-12, 5-5-12 format. For those of you that were in the course before, you might know of this. There's the 5 books of law, 12 books of history, 5 books of poetry, 5 books of major prophets, and the 12 books of minor prophets. And what we're going to do is, like, me and here are not going to give you, like, packets like Dawi did. We expect you guys to bring notebooks. We expect you guys to take notes. And if you miss a week or you need something from this week, one, your classmates are your sources. Second, you guys can ask me for the email, and I'll email you. We're going to be doing PowerPoints, and I'll email you that week's PowerPoint so you can get everything you need. And if you have more questions, you can just direct them to me or towards here. So don't expect little packets for us to hand you out and fill out or whatever. That's just like us taking notes for you. So, and you're the one that knows how to take notes best for yourself. So when we teach, you guys will be taking notes. So one of the things we require you to bring is a notebook. So next week we start off with the format of the 5-12, 5-5-12 of the Old Testament, and just general stuff, how many books there are. We're going to be talking about, well, this is going to relate towards the end, but it's going to be mentioned, the phrase that says that the Old Testament is the New Testament hidden, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And then we're going to get into the book of law. We're going to start off with Genesis. And in Genesis, we're going to be talking about the creation and the original sin. We're going to be talking about the Adam and Eve and stuff. But we're going to go in depth into it. There's a specific meaning for all of them. And again, you guys will understand in that 1 week where we put the New Testament and the Old Testament together. We also talk about Abel and Cain and the offerings they made, Noah's arks, and we get into how the bloodline of Shem leads to Abraham and stuff, and how he became how God was revealed to him. And we also will mention, this is all next week, by the way. If we I'm gonna try to fit it into the time that's given. The story of Isaac and then his sons Jacob and Esau, and how Jacob stole Esau's birthrights, and then that will stop that for next week, and we'll transition into the week after, which is the story of Joseph. The story of how Jacob fights God. Jacob has a fight with the God, and then he gets his name Israel. I think that was one of the questions on the. That was one of them. Who was Jacob? Who was Jacob named after fighting God, and he was named Israel. And we get into the story of Joseph, which is one of Israel's sons, and that will conclude the book of Genesis. Then that will guide us through Exodus. Exodus is mainly of Moses. You guys know the story of Moses, but again, this testament is gonna go in depth, but it's also to give you a general idea. So that's what we're gonna do. This is second week. Then Leviticus is gonna Leviticus is gonna be in the second week, and what we're gonna be talking about is the book of Leviticus talks about how to make offerings to God, and that's kind of relate us back to us. We're gonna take a step aside from just learning from learning about the Old Testament, and talk about how we could make offerings to God in terms of today and how they did it back then. And once we get through Leviticus, there's also major laws that are in the book of Leviticus. We also will touch up on that. Then we have the book of Numbers. During the book of Numbers, we have how from now on, most of this is going to be how the Israelites traveled to the Promised Land, and how Moses leads them. And once Moses leads them in the book of Deuteronomy, it will tell you, by the way, for the Old Testament, the book of Deuteronomy literally means second law. That was one of the questions on the pre-assessment. And Yeah, it basically shows us the how the Israelites, once they were freed from Egypt, is gonna take us throughout the journey, how they became bad, then back to good, and then they wouldn't listen to God, and then they would start listening to God. Just how they flip back and forth from the good and the bad. Um, then once throughout the journey. Once Moses dies, that's when we stop for that week, and we get into the book of history, which starts with Joshua, which was the guy that took over to lead the Israelites after Moses passed. And it'll also tell us the journey that Joshua has led with the Israelites. Then after that, we have the book of Judges. This is where the Israelites really showed like they would be handed a good king or a good judge. They would disrespect God. They went through a cycle of like they sinned, they would sin, and then they would beg for God for a good judge, and He would give them a good God. They would worship, and then they go back to sinning again. This cycle reoccurs 16 times before they actually got a hang of it. And then we transition over to the First Samuel, which is where King David. Well, no. When David becomes, when David defeats Goliath with the throwing of the stone, and then how he would eventually become king. It also talks about how Samuel, the king before David, was envying David because he knew that he was heir to his throne, and how he was threatened by David's presence because he was going to be the next king. After that, we also got to mention David's sins as a king when he impregnated his one of his warriors' wife. Her name was Bathsheba. No, his name was Bathsheba, and her name was Bathsheba, and he. Okay, look. Her name was Bathsheba, and he has him murdered because he impregnated her. And then what do we have? Solomon. Oh, then we have what was King Solomon known for? Wisdom. That was one of the questions that we discussed. And then after that is just we're gonna cover the book of Esther, which is the only book that doesn't mention God. Yeah, that was another question that we had on there. And in the book of Esther, we're gonna see the story of Mordecai and his refusal to bow down to Haman when he asked him. Again, in between the stories we tell you, we're not just gonna I'm not just gonna go through and just tell you, oh, this is what happened, this is what happened. We're gonna find a way to relate these to modern day. Again, this was the Old Testament, so we can't just tell you the stories and just leave it off. We have to find a way, in the sense that we can understand it. So throughout these stories, or throughout everything that goes on in the Old Testament, we're going to be telling you how it relates to us in modern day. And then we have the book of Job, which I think is the greatest book in the Old Testament. It's about a man that had all of the wealth and whatnot, and he has that taken away from him. We look at that in death. And then we have the book of Psalms. Psalms, it's just, if you ever need any inspiration or anything, any guidance, that's the book to read. Even when we're teaching you these things, go home and try to read up on it. It really will help. And it's also when you read the book of Psalms, it's actually a really good book to read. You will find something that hits home to you. You will find something that you will relate to. And come in the front seat. And then we have the book of Proverbs, which is also like Psalms, but the main purpose of Proverbs is to teach wisdom to God's people. And I feel like everybody in here, we can use a little wisdom from God. And then then this is towards the end of the Old Testament. We have the 5 major prophets and the 12 minor prophets, and then that will conclude just the Old Testament part of the course. And hey, I was going to tell you what we're going to be doing for the New Testament.
Everybody looks pretty sleepy. He's alive, people. That was special. He thinks he knows everything. I'm good.
Oh, if I see you sleeping, you're going to stand. I'm being so serious. Let me see you sleeping once.
So, he talked about relating everything back to our time and back to our situation, and I feel like the New Testament is the way to do that. If we have a method of connecting the Old Testament to the New Testament, then the New Testament is just like the New Testament is very relatable. It's your life, it's your story, it's easy, right, to understand. So if we can find the Old Testament and how it connects to the New Testament, it should be easy to understand the Old Testament and the connection it has to us. So the Old Testament, I might cover some of the questions on the paper we gave you, but that's not the purpose today. I'm gonna be answering those throughout the course. So don't look for the answers now. It'll come to you throughout the course. So the first week we're gonna be talking about the Gospels. Everybody named the books specifically. I wanted to what are the first book? What are the first 4 books called? Together they were called the Gospels, right? We know them as the Gospels, and a lot of people know a lot about those specific books. When we talk about the New Testament, that's the book everybody knows, right? So and that's good because it's good that you know it already. So it's good that you have some knowledge already, and we're going to try and broaden that for you. So that's what we're going to talk about mainly, the Gospels. The Gospels are the accounts of the life, the ministry, the death, and the resurrection of Christ. That's what the Gospel is, and they're told from different perspectives. And that's very important because if you guys will hear other courses, perspective is everything, and it talks about why it legitimizes the Bible and the story itself. So that's very important. We'll focus a lot on perspectives and things like that. And only 2 of the Gospels were written by apostles. If you guys didn't know. So the 2 apostles that who are the 2? I should have asked that. Who are the 2 apostles that wrote the Gospels? No, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, right? So 2 of them are apostles and 2 of them are not. So which 2 are apostles?